Hello, I'm Carolyn Eckelman, a researcher at Google, and today I'll be talking through our research on predicting developers' negative feelings about code review. This research covered three specific questions. First, how frequent are negative experiences with code review? Second, what factors are associated with pushback occurring? And third, what metrics detect author-perceived pushback? For the sake of time today, I'll be focusing on 1 and 3. If you'd like more details on research question 2, please do check out our paper. We'll start with the definition that we use of pushback, which is the perception of unnecessary interpersonal conflict in code review while a reviewer is blocking a change request. We started with a version of this definition going into the study based on prior research, and then did slightly evolve that based on the findings of our interviews. Interviews were one of 3 methods that we used to collect data for the study. In our interviews, we talked with 14 Google developers about code review pushback. We covered defining pushback as well as how they dealt with pushback when it occurred. Based on the findings from the interviews, we developed 3 logs-based metrics, which we thought would be good predictors or indicators of pushback occurring in the code review process. The first of those is rounds of review, and a round of review would be a batch of comments that an author or reviewer would send back and forth. We also looked at active reviewing time, which is the time that a reviewer spends in the review tool itself, looking at the code and providing comments. And the third metric is active shepherding time. This is the time that the author spends in the code review tool looking at and responding to comments, as well as the time that they spend revising the code based on the comments that they receive. These later 2 time-based metrics are based on tool logs that we collect and ingest across many different tools across Google. They do indicate actual time spent coding or in the code review tool itself. So they're not calendar elapsed time-based metrics. We then performed a survey. We surveyed over 1,300 Google developers to test if our metrics predict feelings of pushback. And that survey covered overall perceptions of code review, the rating of 2 selected code reviews based on the metrics that we developed, and then finally asking for problematic code reviews. This third piece was a little bit of an insurance policy. We weren't sure how well our metrics would perform, and we wanted to be sure that we collected some code reviews where we knew pushback was occurring so that we could use that data and those examples to help us develop and refine future metrics. Getting to results. For our first research question about frequency of negative experiences, we found that 87% of Google developers are satisfied with the code review process, and 96% of them think that it improves code quality. Yet, 57% of Google developers report a negative experience at least once a quarter in the code review process, and 26% report that negative experience at least once a month. So, while Google developers do find the code review process helpful and useful, negative experiences do happen quite a bit. We intentionally did ask broadly about negative experiences and not about specific pushback. We do think specific pushback with the definition that we have around interpersonal conflict and blocking behaviors is much more rare than the broad negative experiences. We know some of these experiences include long delays that happen because of time zone issues. Our third research question was around metrics and which metrics detected author-perceived pushback. What we did here is a logistic regression using our survey data, and I'll build up our model results here. This is looking at each of our metrics in isolation and how predictive they are of feelings of frustration. This is a logistic regression, and the way to read this is that authors of code reviews with a long shepherding time are 9.9 times more likely to report frustration with that review than an author of a code review that's not flagged with any of our metrics. Code reviews that are flagged with long reviewing time or long rounds only were not statistically significant indicators of frustration. We can look at combination of our metric flags, and here we see that in particular the combination of a long shepherding time and a large number of rounds of review is a particularly strong indicator of frustration, looking at an over 40 times more likely for those authors to report frustration. We see similar levels when we look at the combination of all 3 flags, with 45 times more likely to report feelings of frustration. All in all, we covered 5 different feelings of pushback as part of the study. In addition to frustration, we looked at feelings of acceptance being withheld, feeling excessive change was requested, and feeling negative about future code reviews. In the cases of acceptance and excessive change requested, we see that combination again of long reviewing time and rounds of review, as well as all 3 together, are strong indicators of these feelings of pushback. We did not find that any of our metrics were strong indicators of feeling negative about submitting future code reviews. The final feeling of pushback that we covered was explicitly asking about feelings of interpersonal conflict. And this was an interesting nuance of our data, which is that none of the unflagged code reviews as part of the study included conflict. While that's positive evidence for the utility of our metrics, it is a statistical challenge, as the model then suggests that our metrics are perfect indicators or predictors of conflict. We certainly do not believe that our metrics are perfect predictors, but it does provide some promising evidence. There are certainly cases that we would expect that conflict could exist in situations that didn't include these metrics. This brings us to our conclusion and discussion. We'll cover 4 areas here. The first around pushback frequency. We do see that pushback in the specific definition we look at here is relatively rare, but does occur in code review at Google. We see that our metrics perform well. They have high recall and low precision, and that means these metrics detect code reviews that are much more likely to include feelings of frustration or pushback for authors. They filter out most uneventful code reviews and would have detected 93% of those volunteered, very problematic code reviews. However, the low precision that we see, flagging a lot of code reviews that are innocuous, does suggest there's certainly more work to do to improve the metrics. Third, we see that a third uninvolved party does see similar detection of feelings of pushback as authors. This means that a previously uninvolved person, such as a manager or a mentor, is likely to observe pushback within the review if an author reaches out for help and advice. Finally, I want to talk about uses of these metrics. We think an appropriate use of these metrics is to highlight interactions that may benefit from a self-intervention. You can imagine a notification that comes up in the code review tool indicating that the review is becoming statistically exceptional, and suggesting perhaps escalating the review to a manager, seeking advice from a colleague, or moving a conversation offline. We think there are several inappropriate uses of our metrics, including flagging reviews to management or HR, using them as a justification to say that a change request has gotten enough feedback, and our metrics cannot be used as a substitute for human judgment or empathy. Thank you.